Well. I'm excited to see you guys back here again for another episode. I'm excited for this one. I think it's going to be great, and I hope it's extremely useful given the time of year and the season coming up, okay? So, this is Two Tails, and I'm your host, Gavin Miles. This podcast breaks down hunting and fly fishing from a boots on the ground and a flies on the water perspective. My goal is simple. I want to keep it entertaining, practical, and help you elevate your skills to make every outing count. Well, you guys, we made it to another episode. I'm super excited for this one. We're going to get really practical. We're going to try to emphasize that point of my goal is to be practical here. And we have a little bit of a different setup that I'm hoping you guys can utilize, that you can see, that you can understand through my descriptions in this podcast episode. And this will be a really good one for those tuning in via the video podcast. For those on audio, please feel free when you have more time to go look me up on YouTube, find the episode 7, because today's format is a little different, like I mentioned, and we're going to be doing e-scouting, okay? Scouting from home, from the comfort of your chair, your couch, wherever you want to. And that's why I think it'll be a little bit more useful to see the video. I'm going to try to record my screen and then kind of just overlay it as I am talking to you guys, as I'm breaking things down, as I'm depicting or trying to explain what I'm looking for when I've got a spot that I want to explore. And more importantly, how I utilize Onyx to get the most out of my hunting experience. So please bear with me. This might get a little finicky here, but I want to try something. Let's see here. So jumping into how I like to e-scout is I will identify the unit first of all, right? Looking extremely macro scale here. With the application season coming up, I'm going to identify the species of animal that I want to hunt, and I'm going to identify the area or the unit that I want to hunt said species in, right? So today's episode is going to focus mainly on deer and elk, and I hope you guys enjoy. So now that I've got my species identified, I can then go into, well, where are my opportunities to hunt that species, being elk or deer for this example, right? So I'm going to be doing an e-scouting tutorial here in Utah. I don't want to say too many specifics. I know others hunt this area. I know it's pretty popular, but I know people like to hold things close, near and dear to their heart, so I don't want to kind of divulge the name or the exact location. I'm sure if you guys pay close enough attention, there will be context clues to figure out where this is. But this is an area that I learned through experience just recently, and sure enough, my Onyx e-scouting came to fruition, and there's a lot of film to this area. I'll overlay trail camera pictures, trail camera videos of when my e-scouting turned into in-person scouting, right? Boots on the ground. And I love this spot because it's got a little bit of everything. And because of that, the animals also love it, which is bing, 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 what we're going for, right? So bear with me here. I think this will be awesome. So I've got my species identified. Let's say for elk, right? We're going for elk. That's what we want to look for. We need to identify their habitat now that we've got the species unit, and we're trying to dissect where they're going to be in their own habitat, right? This unit is humongous. It's vast. It's very large, and there's a lot of country to it. So try not to get overwhelmed by that when you first start in a unit. What I like to do if I'm brand new to the unit, I will kind of just do a large flyover, right? I will select just that unit on Onyx, or for example, here we have a great resource called Utah Hunt Planner. and I will go just highlight my one specific unit that I'm looking at, whether that's an over-the-counter unit, whether that's a limited entry unit, whether that's archery, muzzleloader, any legal weapon. So that's what I'm going to start with, identifying the boundaries of my unit. Next, like I mentioned, I'm going to do that flyover as if I were in a helicopter going over all of the terrain, just trying to get an understanding of what this unit looks like. Is it peaks and ridges? Is it plateaus and basins? Is it rolling hills? Is it steep canyons? Is it flatlands? All of this will come back to be of benefit to us as a hunter, to you as a hunter, when you're trying to really lock down a target animal before you start your hunt. And in familiarizing yourself with the unit as a whole, you get to learn certain areas that are maybe private land, areas that are public land. Hopefully, we're all trying to hunt public land and obeying the laws. And with hunting public land, we have to remember that it's public land, right? So I'm trying to be respectful here and showing this area. But there's more to the unit than one might think, right? There's more access points, there's more access roads, there's trailheads, there's camping sites, there's recreational activities just for, normal recreation, boating, fishing, off-roading, motorcycling. All of these different recreations are or can enjoy the same mountains that we hunt in oftentimes. So during my flyover, I will try to look for those certain things, right? Public land, private land. I'll look for trailheads. I'll look for road access. I'll look for logging roads. I'll look for all of these different things just to help build a foundational knowledge of what this unit is like, okay? Once I've done that, I will look for specific items, if you will, a list, and I will try to check off this list as I begin my e-scouting. So I've done my flyover. I've created that foundational knowledge. Now I'm really trying to get into the nitty-gritty, the details, and dissect these microhabitats, right? So for example, this area is pretty much a big plateau, and then it has little drainages, basins coming off of the plateau. So now that I've identified the different characteristics of this area, I'm going to jump into a single basin or a single ridge or a single peak, depending on where you're trying to get into, okay? So let's break it down here. I've identified my spot here. If you can see it on my Onyx, there's a peak kind of right in the middle of the screen here. And we're almost to 11,000 feet in altitude, okay, in elevation. That's pretty tall here in Utah. Then if you can see, I've got this kind of finger ridge feeding from the middle of my screen to the left, and that will come in very important later on in access. And then you can see there's sort of this bench that wraps around the ridge, almost 360. It goes on the south face. The bottom of my screen here is the south, and it wraps around to the east and tries to curl around to the north face of this ridge. Well, down below this bench, so you go the peak, then you've got this really steep wall here, and then you hit this big bench, okay? You can also tell with these elevation lines, the topography lines here. And then once you come off of this bench, we get another big steep drop off to the bottom of this basin where there's a little creek running through. This is kind of where I like to start. I like to identify the topography, the undulation, where the landscape changes, where the hills are, where the flats are, where the basin is, where the benches are, because elk and deer love to utilize those things to their advantage, right? This is their home. This is their everyday. They need to feel comfortable, confident, protected, safe, you name it, here in the mountains. So that's what they like to familiarize themselves with first. They need escape routes. They need comfort. And this little area here on my map has a little bit of all of that. Okay, so now that I've identified the topography, I want to look for the north faces, primarily on the north faces that it's not too steep and that it's timbered. Okay, the elk love timber. It keeps them cool. It thermal regulates not only their bodies, but the winds as they come across those faces to help maintain a constant wind direction inside of that timber, right? Things are a little bit more quiet. They can hear predators or, for example, hunters walking through that space. So as you can see here, I've got a wonderful north face over on the top side of this ridge, right? It's got, let me try to manipulate this so you can see, it has trees, it has basins, it has benches, it has all of these little undulations, right, where the elk can feel safe. Well, it also has some steeper areas where they can sit atop during the day to get that uphill thermal coming to them, and they can smell in front, behind, they can look in front and behind, and they feel really safe here. Well, these north faces are key for this area, right? They're large, especially on this ridge. So my hypothesis when I first found this area was, well, these animals will be bedding here during the night, during the day, and I'm hoping that they'll utilize this little bench that wraps around this ridge here, as you can see by my cursor. And I'm hoping or assuming that there is water on this bench, that there's game trails on this bench, and more importantly, that there's feed, right? Those are 3 key items. So I've identified my north face, which serves the purpose of bedding, right? Secure bedding. Well, now I'm going to jump into feed. So is there a transition area from the bedding to feed? Are they adjacent? Are they miles apart? Where are these animals going to go to feed, right? What's the first thing an animal does once it wakes up? Okay, maybe it stretches, right? Maybe it yawns, whatever it is. Maybe it shakes off some of the snow or rain or whatever has been going on throughout the night. After all of that, they're going to go feed, right? They really love the saying, sleep, eat, repeat. So we're gonna identify the closest feeding areas next to where we're hypothesizing their bedding area to be. In this situation, I'm gonna zoom in here a little bit. I'm thinking the elk are gonna be bedded right in this area. Okay, it's steep enough for them to feel safe. It's not so steep that they're sliding out of their bed and downhill, and they can be comfortable here with the timber. Well, then I'm trying to find still a timber area, but not so heavily timbered that the grasses, that the meadows can't grow, right? So as you can see in here, there might be a little bit of pocket feed, but there's not really any meadows, right? Well, if we zoom out and we come over to this bench, we start to find areas that are a little less timbered, but that the elk can still move through and feel safe. So as you can see here, we've got a meadow here, we've got a meadow here, we've got meadows all along this ridge, right, where it flattens out. These are the places where elk are going to feel safe, where they can return to timber if needed, if they feel threatened, or they can continue to feed out, warm up under the sun, and be happy as a lark, right? So there you have it. We've got bedding areas here. We have a feeding area, meadows adjacent, which is something that we really love to see when we're e-scouting. Well, now what else does an animal need in a habitat? We've got bedding, we've got feed. Now we need water, right? Especially large animals like elk and moose. They need a lot of water, right? Their bodies are very large and they need to drink. So in where we're finding these meadows, we're going to try to find an area of water, whether that's a wallow, whether that's a creek, a lake, a river, you name it. We're going to try to find a water source. My favorite water source here, and I'll get into the specifics, are still water. whether that's a spring, whether that's a wallow, or whether that's, a pond or a lake. Why, might you ask? Why do I look for these rather than moving water? Well, it's because of the noise that rushing water creates. We all know as water moves through, we love the sound, right? It's therapeutic almost. Well, the animals with their heads down need to stay on alert for threats. Well, with their heads down, and if they're drinking from a river, there go two of their senses, right? Their sight and their sound. They're looking down onto the ground, and they can't hear because of the rushing water. So animals, elk in this example, love still water because they can go and they can utilize their scent and their hearing at the same time as they're drinking, right? They feel safe. Well, let's look on this bench back to this area and identify water sources. Well, okay, here's one right here. Now, this water source in my head is a little bit of a yellow flag, right? Okay, is that water? It looks to be. Now, is that deep enough to be there year round? That is a key question that we need to be asking ourselves. When are we going to hunt these animals? Primarily in the late summer and throughout the fall, right? So the water has essentially 9 months to evaporate, to flow down the mountain, and we need to find sources of water that these animals can rely on 24/7, 365. So I've identified this, it seems to be a pond. Let's call this a pond. Well, I'm a little concerned that pond is going to be evaporated or dried out come season time. So let's continue looking on this bench. Oh, there's another one. Let's see here. If we can zoom in, maybe I can spin this around for you. There's another water source right there. Now that pond looks a little deeper to me as compared to this pond, right? This you can almost see the bottom of. You can see some discolor in the water. Looks to me like there's moss or grass, right? Which will absorb that water even faster. So as I come around the point of this little ridge, there seems to be a pond. Now I really like that pond, and I'm gonna add a waypoint to help mark. Let's put water source. I like green, and I'm just gonna nickname this pond. Okay, so I like green for the sole reason of where water is, the grasses grow, and grass to me is green. Okay, so that's a silly little reasoning for me to put green for water, but there you have it. Okay, so in this little micro habitat, we have identified a north slope. Let me flip this back around, and I can add another waypoint to where we identified the bedding area. So I'm adding a waypoint. I want to put bedding area here. And I'm going to put green for green means go. And I'm going to title this bedding area, right? It's on the north face. It's got the timber. It's not too steep, but it's not super flat. Elk feel safe in there. Well, we also identified our feeding areas inside of these meadows, right? I love how close these all are to each other. So maybe I put a waypoint here in this meadow, and I'm going to label it feeding area, right? What color is grass again? Grass is green. So I'm going to call this feeding meadow, and I'm going to give it the color of green. Well, now we've identified kind of the big three keys here. We've got our bedding area, we've got our feeding area, and we've got an area that they can water, that they can access year round. That is a steady source for them. Now, trying to get into even a more detailed perspective here, I want to break down access points. Access points come in many shapes, many sizes, many forms. For this, my first step in identifying access is roads. Okay, now we're taking a step back from the animals here. We're looking at roads. We're looking at access to the area for a human. Now, me personally, I don't love to hunt with the whole world. I like to get into a space that I can call my own. I like to get away from the roads and in an area that's a little bit further off from, say, the parking lot or the trailhead or where there's road hunters. Nothing wrong with them, but I just, call me a weirdo, if you will. But I like to be out on my own in the wilderness. So we've got our area identified here. Well, let's look for roads. Well, here's an unnamed road. So let's see if that is accessible to us. And if we zoom in, it looks like it is, right? This road looks like a 2-track that ends somewhere in here, maybe by this creek. So let's put an X because X marks the spot where people will park. So I'm going to say parking /trailhead here. And I'm gonna just mark this black. Sticks out on the map pretty easily. I can identify the access point to this area. Well, we can see that this branches off and there's kind of a main road right here. Okay. Well, that's good to know, because if we zoom out a little bit, we've got some distance from this road, right? But maybe it's a little close for your comfort. Maybe it's not far enough away from this trailhead, and that's great. You can then find other places similar to this on your own, and you can take this knowledge and apply it to different areas, okay? Continuing on with our map, so now that we've found roads and we've found trailheads or parking lots, let's find access for the animals. My first step in access for animals is, what's their road? What's their freeway? Well, their freeways are game trails, okay? So let's zoom back in here and let's try to identify a game trail. Now we've got this area that we really like. On this bench, animals will always find the easiest route on a mountain to maneuver, to go through, and typically it's not straight up a hill. So I have a hunch that there will be a game trail connecting these 3 dots as it goes on this bench and through their feeding area, their bedding area, and where they can find water. So let's zoom in here. Maybe I'll just come straight above, bird's eye view, and let's see if there's a game trail coming out of this bedding area. Oh, it looks like there's one right here. It starts sort of by this first water source. Now, game trails can be a little finicky or difficult to find in timbered areas because they almost are like a dotted line instead of a solid line, because they'll go into shade, they'll go through tree patches, and you kind of have to connect the dots. But here it looks like it dissipates just in this area here before it gets to this water, which is a good thing. To me, that means that the animals are, in fact, accessing this water. Maybe it turns into a wallow come season time, but it looks like it leaves and continues through the timber. There's an obvious part of it right there. Let's see if I can go 2D on my map and zoom in. So water, game trail, cuts through these trees, game trail through the meadow, right? That's a pretty obvious deep cut game trail, and it looks like it wiggles its way through the timber here, connects into another meadow where they would feed, comes around the edge, and there you have it. One game trail connecting 3 of the most important key elements for animals in the wilderness. That right there is a hot spot. In my mind, this is where I'm going to start my scouting when I get boots on the ground and when I'm out this summer. If I draw the tag, that's where I'm headed first, okay? I'm going to go confirm, I'm going to verify with my own eyes and with my own boots on the ground if these are still there, if this game trail is still in the ground, if the meadows are full of grass or if they've dried out. I'm going to check these water levels, see if they're ponds or wallows, if they're springs. And Then I'm going to go see if this bedding area really is a bedding area. I'm going to try to find little digs where they will dig out their beds, and I'm going to try to find those spots on this north face. If I can identify those areas, then I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to that when season comes around. Okay, so there you have it. Game trails. We love game trails. And where there's game trails, there's game. So I really like this spot, just as I've, given it a brief overview here. We've got a bench where the animals will hang out. We've got feed, bedding, water, and we've noted where this game trail goes. So maybe I'll add another waypoint just for when I get there in person to go make sure that this game trail is actually connecting these spots, right? So I'm going to put trail, I'm going to put game trail, and I'm going to say game trail through the big three. The big three being bed, feed, water. And it's an axis, so I'm going to put it in black. So there you have it. There's my little breakdown of this ridge, this little basin, and where I think these animals are going to be based off of e-scouting. There's my access point for me, myself, and I. And I'm going to try to find a game trail or a track that goes through either this north face, up and over the ridge, and down around to my waypoints, my points of interest. So now, talking more about access points, we've identified access points for us, for deer and elk. Let's look at another type of access point, which would be a pinch point, right? Pinch points often go over ridges there, wherever in the mountain bottlenecks, right? All the traffic has to come into one area. We love these areas because it concentrates all of the animals. So where might an area like that be? I don't think it's going to be on a bench because benches are flat. Animals can access all of that very easily. I don't think it's going to be on a steep face because, like I said, animals typically won't go straight up or straight down unless there's a threat and they're trying to get away immediately. So maybe this curve comes around. It looks like this steep face comes around and this steep face drops off. Now, I know there was a game trail that came around the point of this mountain. So I wonder if it follows around, and this might be our pinch point right in here where this face comes down, because I would think this is too steep for animals to like going over. And I would think they wouldn't want to drop straight off of this. So I want to find, looks like there might be a little bit more water. And sure enough, there's a game trail here. And it looks like it curves around right where this steep face meets up. And it comes down at an angle around to the bottom of this basin, right? Looks like it cuts down through this face here, drops down through that shale slide, and wow, look at all of those game trails on that south face. We really like that. So I'm going to put here, going to add a little bit of a waypoint, kind of where all of this comes together. There's a little song that I grew up with, right? Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Well, this is our pinch point, and it is the junction. Let's see. There's a pinch point, waypoint, and like I said, it's black for access. Just general knowledge of this area. So we've got the steep face here. We've got the steep face here. And we've got where all of these trails create this junction, aka our pinpoint waypoint. Wow, that's a mouthful. Pinpoint waypoint. There you have it. There is kind of the overview of this area. We've got really good base information to go off of when we get there in person. So let's talk about, that's e-scouting. Let's talk about these ridges. What do the ridges create that is beneficial to us as hunters? Well, it gives us glassing advantages. It gives us, almost a bird's eye view of the landscape. And that is huge for us when scouting in person, right? So I'm going to come find a spot that I think would provide a really good vantage point for me to see as much country as possible. So if this is my trailhead here, I think I could walk up through these north face meadows kind of to the spine of this ridge and come out to this high point. As you can tell, this seems to be a pretty good point with steep drop-offs on each side. That's where I'm going to perch myself to have the best view of this area. And I'm going to add a waypoint here as kind of my glassing knob, let's call it, if I could spell them. And I'm going to put glassing waypoint and black for general. Okay, so there you have it. I have my X marks the spot for the parking. I have my glassing viewpoint. I have pinch points and game trails, all of my access, all my general information in black. Then I like the color green because it means it's a hot spot, right? Green means go to this area. So we've got our bedding identified, our trails, our bedding, or our feed, and our water, all within close proximity of one another. The elk don't have to expend much energy. They are, honestly, I don't want to call them lazy, but they're very efficient, right? Maybe that's a better word. Very energy efficient. They will expend the least amount of energy and consume a maximum amount of energy in a close area, close proximity, right, to where they like to hang out. So this is their house. We've broken it down by the big three, and that's my takeaway for you guys, right? A little bit different of a format here. So I don't have a story necessarily with this, but this area was a spot that I actually went, put boots on the ground, and here's some B-roll for you guys, right? Of where I placed trail cameras on this game trail and got a lot of action. Now, another talking point for elk is when pre-season scouting, when e-scouting, you want to find areas where the nursery is. And this will be a podcast episode in the future, is the benefits of a nursery. A nursery meaning where the cow elk, where the calf elk will summer, because where the cow elk and the calf elk, where the herds hang out during the majority of the year, that is where the big bulls will go during the season to find a mate, right? To create their harem and group off in these herds run by the bulls. So if we go there and we're scouting, if we're e-scouting and we find habitat that we hypothesize elk will be in, we're really looking for not only bull elk, but we're looking for good numbers of cows and calves. Because like I said, the bull elk hang out by themselves in bachelor groups in the summer. And when that testosterone starts flowing and things get heated up in the fall, they will move, migrate, and put themselves into the middle of these nurseries. So let's figure out through e-scouting where I would put a trail camera to help me identify where these animals are moving, where they're cruising. I love putting it on pinch points. I love putting it on game trails where these different points of interest intersect. So we've got our pond here, right? It looks like there's some meadows nearby, and this game trail comes through the middle of all of it. So I'm going to find a tree, call it this patch of trees or that patch of trees, or a tree right off of the game trail, call it this one. And I'm going to set up a game trail there to try to capture the best understanding of where these animals are moving. So I'm going to say trail camera. Let's find the icon for it. And this one is going to be the color black, right? This will help me kind of just navigate the area when I'm there. And I really like the spot. I feel really confident, right? We've got game trails on this south face. We've got all the things, in my opinion, that the elk will love. So there you have it. I would love to hear your guys' feedback on this area. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on other things, other details, features of the landscape that you look for while e-scouting. But please let me know if this is helpful when you draw that application. Let's rewind, let's review. I love repetition as a student myself. The first thing when we are successful on that draw, and I really hope all of us are successful in all of our dream hunts, whether that's this year or in 25 years or all of those years, when we draw successful, we're going to identify the unit. And I know that sounds a little silly. Obviously, you know the unit already if you're applying there. We need to identify the boundaries. We're going to do our flyover. We're going to just familiarize ourselves with the unit holistically. Everything that's in that unit, right? Then once we identify that and we've got our knowledge base laid, then we're going to jump into these microhabitats. We're going to identify landscape features, ridges, plateaus, basins, canyons, faces, slopes. All of these different things are just adding to our bucket of e-scouting. Once I identify the type of area I want to hunt, then I will jump into dissecting it in detail like I've done here through kind of this demo, this little tutorial. And once I've got my points of interest, my waypoints laid out on Onyx, that's where I'm headed. If I like it, if it's a hot spot, I am so hopeful that there will be animals that when I get there in person and I've scouted it throughout the summer, throughout the preseason activities, that come season, if there's not animals there, I am dumbfounded. I am a little aside myself, right? Because I feel so confident with these e-scouting tips that you guys too will find areas without ever having been there prior. You will find areas that hold elk, deer, animals all year round that you can rely on and that you can be consistent with. So you guys, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for sticking around. I'll leave you guys with a lesson of scout, and scout some more. Hasta luego.